An excerpt from the critically acclaimed book It by Stephen King. As the corpse of their malformed foe shrinks into the darkness, hopefully to never be seen again, the following is what happens between our heroes. Then she was in darkness, alone with the sound of the falling web and Eddie's simple, moveless weight. She didn't want to let him go, didn't want to let his face lie on the foul floor of this place. So she held his head in the crook of an arm that had gone mostly numb and brushed his hair away from his damp forehead. She thought of the birds. That was something she supposed she had gotten from Stan. Poor Stan, who hadn't been able to face this. All of them. I was their first love. She tried to remember it. It was something good to think about in all this darkness, where you couldn't place the sounds. It made her feel less alone. At first it wouldn't come. The image of the birds intervened. Crows and grackles and starlings, spring birds that came back from somewhere, while the streets were still running with meltwater and the last patches of crusted dirty snow clung grimly to their shady places. It seemed to her that it was always on a cloudy day that you first heard and saw those spring birds and wondered where they came from. Suddenly, they were just back in Derry, filling the white air with their raucous chatter. They lined the telephone wires and roof peaks of the Victorian houses on West Broadway. They jostled for places on the aluminum branches of the elaborate TV antenna on top of Wally's Spa. They loaded the wet black branches of the elms on Lower Main Street. They settled. They talked to each other in the screamy, babbling voices of old country women at the weekly grand bingo games. And then, at some signal which humans could not discern, they all took wing at once, turning the sky black with their numbers, and came down somewhere else. Yes, the birds. I was thinking of them because I was ashamed. It was my father who made me ashamed, I guess. And maybe that was its doing, too. Maybe. The memory came, the memory behind the birds. But it was vague and disconnected. Perhaps this one always would be. Her thoughts broke off as she realized that Eddie comes to her first because he is the most frightened. He comes to her not as her friend of that summer or as her brief lover now, but the way he would have come to his mother only 3 or 4 years ago to be comforted. He doesn't draw back from her smooth nakedness, and at first she doubts if he even feels it. He is trembling, and although she holds him, the darkness is so perfect that even this close she cannot see him. Except for the rough cast, he might as well be a phantom. "What do you want?" he asks. "You have to put your thing in me," she says. He tries to pull back, but she holds him, and he subsides against her. She has heard someone, Ben, she thinks, draw in his breath. "Bevi, I can't do that. I don't know how." "I think it's easy, but you'll have to get undressed." She thinks about the intricacies of managing cast and shirt, first somehow separating and then rejoining them in amends. Your pants, anyway. "No, I can't." But she thinks part of him can and wants to, because his trembling has stopped, and she feels something small and hard, which presses against the right side of her belly. "You can," she says, and pulls him down. The surface beneath her bare back and legs is firm. The distant thunder of the water is drowsy, soothing. She reaches for him. There's a moment when her father's face intervenes, harsh and forbidding. "I want to see if you're intact." And then she closes her arms around Eddie's neck, her smooth cheek against his smooth cheek. And as he tentatively touches her small breasts, she sighs and thinks for the first time, this is Eddie, and she remembers a day in July. Only could have been last month? when no one else turned up in the Barrens but Eddie, and he had a whole bunch of little Lulu comic books, and they read together for most of the afternoon. Little Lulu, looking for beetleberries, and getting in all sorts of crazy situations. Witch Hazel, all of those guys. It had been fun. She sings of birds, in particular of the grackles and starlings, and crows that come back in the spring, and her hands go to his belt and loosen it, and he says again that he can't do that. She tells him that he can. She knows he can, and what she feels is not shame or fear now, but a kind of triumph. Where? He says, and that hard thing pushes urgently against her inner thigh. Here, she says. Bevy, I'll fall on you, he says, and she hears his breast start to whistle painfully. I think that's sort of the idea, she tells him, and holds him gently and guides him. He pushes forward too fast, and there's pain. Sss, she draws her breath in, her teeth biting at her lower lip, and thinks of the birds again. The spring birds, lining the rooftops of houses, taking wing all at once under the low March clouds. Beverly, he says uncertainly, are you okay? Go slower, she says. It'll be easier for you to breathe. He does move more slowly, and after a while his breathing speeds up, but she understands this is not because there is anything wrong with him. The pain fades. Suddenly he moves more quickly, then stops, stiffens, and makes a sound. She senses that this is something for him, something extraordinarily special, something like flying. She feels powerful. She feels a sense of triumph rise up strongly within her. Is this what her father was afraid of? Well, he might be. There was power in this act. All right, a chain-breaking power that was blood deep. She feels no physical pleasure, but there is a kind of mental ecstasy in it for her. She senses the closeness. He puts his face against her neck, and she holds him. He's crying. She holds him, and feels the part of him that made a connection between them begin to fade. It is not leaving her, exactly. It is simply fading, becoming less. When his weight shifts away, she sits up and touches his face in the darkness. Did I what? Whatever it is. I don't know exactly. He shakes his head. She feels it with her hand against his cheek. I don't think it was exactly like the big boys say, but it was really something. He speaks low so the others can't hear. I love you, Bevy. Her consciousness breaks down a little there. She's quite sure there's more talk. Some whispered, some loud, and can't remember what it said. It doesn't matter. Does she have to talk each of them into it all over again? Yes, probably. But it doesn't matter. They have to be talked into it. This essential human link between the world and the infinite. The only place where the bloodstream touches eternity. It doesn't matter. What matters is love and desire. Here in this dark is as good a place as any. Better than some, maybe. Mike comes to her, then Richie, and the act is repeated. Now she feels some pleasure. Dim heat in her childish, unmatured sex, and she closes her eyes as Stan comes to her, and she thinks of the birds, spring, and the birds, and she sees them again and again, all lighting at once, filling up the winter naked trees, shock-wave riders on the moving edge of nature's most violent season. She sees them take wing again and again, the flutter of their wings like the snap of many sheets on the line, and she thinks, a month from now, every kid in Dairy Park will have a kite. They'll run to keep the string from getting tangled with each other. She thinks again, this is what flying is like. With Stan, as with the others, there is that rueful sense of fading, of leaving, with whatever they truly need from this act, some ultimate, close, but as yet unfound. Did you she asks again. Now, though she doesn't know exactly what it is, she knows that he hasn't. There's a long wait, and then Ben comes to her. He is trembling all over, but it is not the fearful trembling she felt in Stan. "Beverly, I can't," he says in the tone which purports to be reasonable and is anything but. "You can too. I can feel it." She sure can. There's more of his hardness, more of him. She can feel it below the gentle push of his belly. Its size raises a certain curiosity, and she touches the bulge slightly. He groans against her neck, and the blow of his breast causes her bare body to dimple with goosebumps. She feels the first twist of real heat race through her. Suddenly, the feeling in her is very large. She recognizes that it is too big. And is he too big? Can she take that into herself? Some feeling that walks in her boots. This is like Henry's M80s. Something not meant for kids. Something that could explode and blow you up. This was not the place or time for worry. Here there was love, desire, and the dark. If they didn't try for the first two, they would surely be left with the last. Beverly, don't. Yes, I. Show me how to fly, she says, with a calmness she doesn't feel, aware by the fresh wet warmth on her cheek and neck that he has begun to cry. Show me, Ben. No. If you wrote the poem, show me. Feel my hair if you want to, Ben. It's all right. Beverly, I. He's not just trembling now. He's shaking all over. But she senses again that this is not at all fear. Part of it is the precursor of the act that this is all about. She thinks of the birds, his face, his dear, sweet, earnest face, and knows it is not fear. It is wanting he feels, a deep, passionate wanting, now barely held in check, and she feels that sense of power again, something like flying, something like looking down from above and seeing all the birds on the roof peaks, on the TV antenna atop Wally's, seeing streets spread out map-like. Oh, desire, right. This was something. It was love and desire that taught you to fly. Ben! Yes! She cries suddenly, and the leash breaks. She feels pain again, and for a moment there is the frightening sense of being crushed. Then he props himself up on the palms of her hands, and that feeling is gone. He's big. Oh, yes. The pain is back, and it's much deeper than when Eddie first entered her. She has to bite her lip again and think of the birds until the burning is gone. But it does go, and she's able to reach up and touch his lips with one finger, and he moans. The heat is back, and she feels her power suddenly shift to him. She gives it gladly and goes with it. There is a sensation first of being rocked, of a delicious spiraling sweetness, which makes her begin to turn her head helplessly from side to side, and a tuneless humming comes from between her closed lips. This is flying. This, O love, O desire. Oh, this is something impossible to deny. Binding, giving, making a strong circle. Binding, giving, flying. "Oh, Ben! Oh, my dear! Yes!" she whispers, feeling the sweat stand out on her face, feeling their connection, something firmly in place, something like eternity, the number 8 rocked over on its side. "I love you so much, dear!" And she feels the thing begin to happen, something of which the girls who whisper and giggle about sex in the girls' room have no idea, at least as far as she knows. They only marvel at how gushy sex must be, and now she realizes that for many of them, sex must be some unrealized, undefined monster. They refer to the act as it. Would you do it? Do your sister and your boyfriend do it? Do your mom and dad still do it? And how they never intend to do it. Oh yes, you would think that the whole girls' side of the 5th grade class was made up of spinsters to be, and it is obvious to Beverly that none of them can suspect this conclusion, and she is only kept from screaming by her knowledge that the others will hear and think her badly hurt. She puts the side of her hand in her mouth and bites down hard. She understands the screamy laughter of Greta Bowie and Sally Mueller and all the others better now. Hadn't they, the 7 of them, spent most of this, the longest, scariest summer of their lives, laughing like loons? You laugh because that what's fearful and unknown is also what's funny. You laugh the way a small child will. Sometimes laugh and cry at the same time when a capering circus clown approaches, knowing it is supposed to be funny, but it is also unknown, full of the unknown's eternal power. Biting her hand will not stay the cry, and she can only reassure them and Ben by crying out her affirmation in the darkness. Yes! 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 Glorious images of flight fill her head, mixing with the harsh calling of the grackles and starlings. These sounds become the world's sweetest music. So she flies up, and now the power is not with her or with him, but somewhere between them, and he cries out, and she can feel his arms trembling, and she arches up and into him, feeling his spasms, his touch, his total fleeting intimacy with her in the dark. They break through into the life-light together. Then it is over, and they are in each other's arms, and he tries to say something. Perhaps some stupid apology that would hurt what she remembers. Some stupid apology like a handcuff. She stops his words with a kiss and sends him away. Bill comes to her. He tries to say something, but his stutter is almost total now. You be quiet, she says, secure in her new knowledge, but aware that she is tired now. Tired and damned sore. The insides and backs of her sides feel sticky, and she thinks it's maybe because Ben actually finished, or maybe because she is bleeding. Everything is going to be totally okay. Are you sure? He says. Yes, she says, and links her hands behind his neck, feeling the sweaty mat of his hair. You just bet. Shh. It is not as it was with Ben. There is passion, but not the same kind. Being with Bill now is the best conclusion to this that there could be. He is kind, tender, just short of calm. She senses his eagerness, but it is tempered and held back by his anxiety for her. Perhaps because only Bill and she herself realize what an enormous act this is, and how it must never be spoken of. Not to anyone else, not even to each other. At the end, she is surprised by that sudden upsurge, and she has time to think. Oh, it's going to happen again. I don't know if I can stand it. But her thoughts are swept away by the utter sweetness of it, and she barely hears him whisper, I love you, Bev. I love you. I always loved you. Saying it over and over, and not stuttering at all. She hugs him to her, and for a moment they stay that way, his smooth cheek against hers. He withdraws from her without saying anything, and for a little while she's alone, pulling her clothes back together, slowly putting them on, aware of a dull throbbing pain of which they, being males, will never know, aware also of a certain exhausted pleasure and the relief of having it over. There is an emptiness down there now, and although she is glad that her sex is her own again, the emptiness imparts a strange melancholy which she could never express, except to think of bare trees under a white winter sky. Empty trees, trees waiting for blackbirds to come like ministers at the end of March to preside over the deaths of snow. She finds them by groping for their hands. For a moment, no one speaks, and when someone does, it does not surprise her much that it's Eddie. I think when we went right 2 turns back, we should have gone left. Jeez, I knew that, but I was so sweaty and been frigged up. Been frigged up your whole life, Eds, Richie says. His voice is pleasant. The raw edge of panic is completely gone. We went wrong some other places too, Eddie says, ignoring him. But that's the worst one. If we can find our way back there, we just might be okay. They form up in a clumsy line, Eddie first, Beverly second, her hand on Eddie's shoulder as Mike's is on hers. They begin to move again, faster this time. Eddie displays none of his former nervous care. We're going home, she thinks, and shivers with relief and joy. Home. Yes, and that will be good. We've done our job, what we came for. Now we can go back to just being kids again, and that will be good too. As they move through the dark, she realizes the sound of running water is closer. A paraphrased quote from a review by Grady Hendrix of Tor.com. This moment was, in a sense, the heart of the book, and a thematic demonstration of the crossing from childhood to adulthood, and I concluded that it is a way for King to tell kids that sex, even unplanned sex, even sex that's kind of weird, even sex where a girl loses her virginity in the sewer, can be powerful and beautiful if the people having it truly respect and like each other.